Okay, so imagine this, right? You're online and you're looking for something very specific, like, let's say, cremation services. But all that's popping up are these super generic funeral planning tips.
Hmm.
I don't know about you, but that would be kind of frustrating, wouldn't it?
It is. It really is. And it kind of highlights a problem a lot of businesses face,
Yeah.
especially in a field as, well, sensitive as the funeral industry.
It is sensitive. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. We've got this newsletter here from Directors Corner, their digital marketing agency. And get this, they work exclusively with funeral homes. And they have some uh, really interesting insights into how these businesses can actually connect better with families online.
Yeah, and what's fascinating to me about this is that they're not just saying, like, get online. It's deeper than that. They're really emphasizing this need for targeted content stuff that speaks directly to what each person needs.
Hmm.
Way more nuanced.
Right. Because it's not enough to just have a website anymore.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a website. It's about having the right content, and it's got to be easy to find. This newsletter really stresses that just having a basic online presence,
Yeah.
it's just not cutting it these days.
It's like, imagine the difference between like a billboard, right? But it's on a deserted highway
Hmm.
versus, one of those ads that pops up on your phone just when you were thinking about buying that exact thing. It's all about the right people at the right time with the right message.
And Director's Corner breaks it down into what they call these content lines.
Yeah.
So they suggest thinking of each service, every service a funeral home offers, as like its own line with its own very specific targeted info. So you've got your traditional funeral services, memorials, grief support, all that pre-planning for burial.
Hmm.
And then you've got cremation, which is a whole other world. You've got the process itself, urns, what you can even do with cremated remains, eco-friendly options.
And they don't stop there. Cemeteries too, pre-planning for plots, mausoleums, memorial gardens. They even talk about like the history and family stories that are tied to a particular cemetery. And then
Yeah.
there's monuments, markers, all the designs, how you personalize them, materials, engravings.
Right.
And then maybe the most surprising one, they've got a whole content line for hospice and end-of-life care.
Okay, yeah, that one really stood out to me too. It's interesting because it's kind of going beyond just the traditional, funeral home things. It's like a more holistic approach. It's
Yeah.
about that whole end of life journey. You've got grief support, advanced care planning, even information about hospice partnerships. It speaks to the need to have a bigger conversation about death and dying.
Hmm.
And people are clearly looking for this stuff.
Absolutely. It shows how deeply they understand how people are approaching these topics online these days. Nobody's just searching for funeral homes near me anymore. They want the specifics, right? Like the different options you have, different stages of the process, and different ways people cope with loss. That's
Yeah.
huge.
It is. It's like they're acknowledging that people are coming to this, well, they're coming to this with so many more needs and questions than before. And they're saying, hey, we're here to help you navigate all of it.
And I think that's where the real power is in this approach. It goes way beyond marketing, right? This is about providing something real, something valuable to people who are going through a really tough time.
Yeah. So instead of just having like one generic website or a social media page that's trying to be everything to everyone, they're suggesting, hey, create a more targeted experience, something that speaks directly to each individual. It's much more personalized and, honestly, more empathetic.
It is. It's about meeting people where they are,
Yeah.
right? Emotionally and just informationally.
Okay, so we talked about the what of targeted content, those different content lines, how you weave them together. But let's talk about the why. Why is this approach so important? Why are they making such a big deal about ditching the generic stuff?
Because, to put it simply, it doesn't work. Generic content, it just doesn't engage people. You're not going to attract leads. You're not going to rank well in search engines. It's kind of the opposite of what you want.
Yeah, they really hammer that home. Like they flat out say generic content can actually hurt you. Lower engagement, fewer leads, and you basically disappear in those search engine rankings.
It makes sense if you think about it. We're all drowning in information online. Everyone's scrolling, skimming, trying to find something that's actually for them. If your stuff is just blah, generic, it's gone, lost in the sea of content.
Like trying to talk in a huge crowded room. If you're not saying something interesting, something relevant, nobody's going to hear you.
Right. And search engines are getting smarter by the day. Their goal is to give people exactly what they're looking for. So if your website's full of generic stuff that's not really diving deep into anything, you're kind of invisible.
It's not just about creating more content, then. It's about creating better content, right? Stuff that's targeted, informative, and engaging. And that's where Director's Corner steps in.
Mm.
They say, and this is pretty bold, they say they're the only digital marketing agency out there that's focusing on these 5 key content lines in the funeral industry.
Which, to say the only is a big statement. It tells you there's a real need for this kind of specialized service in this industry. And it makes sense, right? This is a field that honestly has been slow to adapt to all this digital stuff. But more and more, people are going online for information about death and dying. It's the reality. Funeral homes have to catch up.
And it sounds like Director's Corner is trying to lead that charge.
They are. They're bringing something totally fresh to an industry that, could use a little shaking up.
Okay, so let's dig into how they actually put all of this content strategy into action. Because they don't just talk about it, they have a whole process for creating and implementing it.
Yeah, and their approach seems very systematic, very data-driven, which I always appreciate.
Absolutely. So it's a 5-step process. And it all starts with what they call, are you ready for this? Auditing existing content.
Which, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Before you create anything new, you got to take a look at what you've already got. It's like cleaning out your closet before you go shopping, right?
Yes. You got to get rid of the old stuff, see what you're missing, maybe repurpose a few things.
And that's where their expertise comes in. They can look at a funeral home's website, their social media, and really pinpoint those areas where they can create content that's way more specific, way more targeted.
And they don't just stop there. Once they've got a handle on what's already out there, they move on to this thing they call, wait for it, AEO, keyword research.
AEO. Okay, now that's interesting. I gotta admit, I'm not familiar with that one.
So AEO stands for Answer Engine Optimization. And it's all about really understanding the questions that people are actually asking online. Instead of just focusing on general keywords like funeral home or cremation, they're looking at these long-tailed keywords. They're the ones that really show you exactly what people are typing into those search engines.
So it's not just about getting your website to show up for any old keyword. It's about knowing what questions people are asking and making sure that your content's got the answers.
Precisely. It's speaking the language of the person searching, basically. Providing the information they want and making it clear, concise, easy to understand. And this is where their knowledge of the funeral industry comes in. They can really anticipate what people need because they've been working in this world for so long.
It's like having a local guide when you're traveling somewhere new.
Yeah.
They know all the hidden spots, all the little details you wouldn't find in a typical guidebook.
I love that. And that's what Director's Corner is doing. They're like the local guides for the digital funeral world.
I like that.
They know the terrain.
They know the terrain. So we've seen just how important this targeted content idea is, especially for something like the funeral industry. But I'm really curious to hear more about how Director's Corner actually makes this happen. They mention a 5-step process, right?
And it's surprisingly thorough, I gotta say, which I appreciated. It shows that they're not just, throwing around buzzwords. They've really thought this through.
Okay, so walk me through it. What's that first step?
All right, they start with something called a content audit.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically like taking inventory, but for your website, social media, any online presence you've got. They're looking for what's already there, what's outdated, and most importantly, where are the gaps.
That makes total sense. You can't build a good strategy if you don't know where you're starting from. It's like, trying to plan a road trip without knowing where your car is parked.
Exactly. And they bring all their expertise to this, right? Because they know specifically what questions people are asking in the funeral industry.
Mm-hmm.
So they can spot those missing pieces that a funeral home might not even realize are important.
So let's say they've done the audit. What happens next?
This is where it gets really interesting. They dive into keyword research. But there's a twist. They call it AEO, Answer Engine Optimization.
I'm intrigued. How is that different from, regular SEO?
It's about going beyond just getting your website to show up for some basic keywords. They're looking at what people call those long tail searches, the really specific questions that people are typing in.
So instead of just cremation, it's more like, what are the different kinds of cremation urns? Or how do I plan a cremation memorial service, but, on a budget?
You got it.
Yeah.
They're trying to get inside the searcher's head, basically. What's their intent, their real need behind that search? And that's where, again, Director's Corner's knowledge of the funeral industry is so valuable.
Wow.
They know what questions people have because they've been working with funeral homes for so long. And once they've got those key words all figured out, then it's on to building a content calendar.
Ah, so they're not just creating blog posts or videos randomly. They're actually planning it out strategically.
Exactly. 3 months in advance, they map out what topics they're going to cover and when each one's going to be published. So it's
Sure.
all about consistency, making sure people are seeing something new and relevant from that funeral home on a regular basis.
It's like an editorial calendar, like for a magazine, right?
Good.
You want that good mix of content, something for everyone. And you have to space it out so people don't feel overwhelmed.
And it's not just for the funeral home's website either. They're planning for social media posts, maybe email newsletters, all tied back to those content lines we talked about earlier.
Okay, so they've done the audit, they've got the keywords, the calendar's all set. What's the next stage?
Promotion. Because honestly, the best content in the world is useless if nobody sees it. But here's the thing, they don't just rely on paid ads, They emphasize something called organic reach.
Ah, yes, getting that organic reach. So that's about making sure the content's good enough, relevant enough that people are going to find it naturally, right? Through search engines or by sharing it with each other.
Exactly. So they're using social media strategically, sharing bits and pieces of blog posts, maybe behind-the-scenes videos of the funeral home staff, things that build that genuine connection with the audience.
So it's not about like shouting your message from the rooftops. It's more like whispering it to the right people at the right time. And that's where I think the targeted approach really pays off.
Right. And the final step in their process, and this one really impressed me, is tracking results. So they don't just say, hey, we'll get you more website traffic and leave it at that. They provide these really detailed reports showing how their content strategy is actually impacting the funeral home's business.
Okay, so what kind of data are we talking about here?
Everything from website analytics, like, how many people are visiting the site, how long they're staying on each page, to like leads generated, meaning people who actually contacted the funeral home after seeing some of this content.
See, that's crucial. It's one thing to say, oh, you're getting more engagement, but it's another thing entirely to show that it's actually leading to real inquiries, maybe even pre-need arrangements. That's huge.
Exactly. And that's the kind of proof that funeral homeowners need, right?
Yeah.
They want to know that their investment in this whole digital marketing thing is actually paying off.
So it's not just a feel-good approach. They've got the numbers to back it up.
Right. And I think that's really what makes Directors Corner stand out. They're not just a marketing agency. They're truly partners with their clients. They get the industry, they know the challenges, and they're like fully committed to helping funeral homes really thrive in this whole digital age.
What's really impressive to me is how much they emphasize data and transparency. It's kind of refreshing to see a marketing agency that's actually willing to show their work, prove that what they're doing is valuable.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that level of transparency, I think, is so essential, especially in an industry like this. People are looking for authenticity, for someone they can really trust.
Absolutely. And Directors Corner is building that trust by just being open and honest about their process and, of course, about the results they're getting.
So even though this whole newsletter is focusing on the funeral industry, those core principles they're laying out, they're relevant to like anyone trying to connect online in a meaningful way.
You're so right. Think about it. A small business owner, a freelancer, even just someone who wants to share their thoughts and ideas with the world. The same rules apply. It's about understanding your audience, creating content that really speaks to them, and proving that you know what you're talking about in a way that builds trust.
And those are lessons that, everyone can learn from no matter what field you're in. It's not just about clicks or likes. It's about building real connections that have a positive impact.
Well said. So I think it's worth taking a moment to really reflect on that. We've seen how Directors Corner is doing it in the funeral world, but how can our listeners apply these ideas to their own lives, their own work? Where are those opportunities for more targeted, intentional communication?
That's a great question to think about, and we'll dig into that even more as we wrap up our deep dive into this really fascinating topic. So we've been spending all this time, breaking down this idea of targeted content, using the funeral industry as our case study. Thanks to this Directors Corner newsletter, it's been pretty eye-opening. But it keeps hitting me. This goes way beyond just one industry, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The principles they're talking about, those apply to pretty much anything where you're trying to, connect with people online. Like, think about it. A musician who wants to share their music, a writer building their platform, even someone who's just trying to find a job. Those same rules apply.
It's almost like a whole different way of thinking, isn't it? We're so used to blasting our message out to everyone, the wider the better.
Yeah.
But this is different, more focused, more intentional.
It is. It's the difference between like shouting into a huge crowd versus having a real one-on-one conversation. When you're targeted, you're actually connecting on a deeper level. That's how you build trust, how you actually have an impact.
And I think that's even more important now than ever. I mean, come on, we're all overwhelmed with information. It's coming from everywhere. People are craving something real, something authentic. They want to know you get them, you know. You understand their needs. You're not just trying to make a sale.
It's all about providing value, and that value, it comes from understanding your audience and tailoring your message to what they need. Think about it when you're searching for something online, what are you going to click on? Something super generic or something that's like, hey, this is exactly what I was looking for.
Oh, definitely going for the one that feels like it was made just for me.
Mhm.
That's the whole power of this targeted approach, right? It creates that connection like, hey, they get me.
And that's exactly what Director's Corner's nailing in the funeral world. They get it. People are coming to them with all these different emotions, questions, things they need. And instead of trying to be all things to all people, they're focusing on specific groups within their audience, creating content that actually speaks to those people.
Okay, so let's bring this back to our listener. What's the takeaway here? How can they use this in their own lives, their own work?
I think the first thing is just step back for a second. Really think about who your audience is. What are their needs? What are their pain points? What are they typing into Google, you know?
And once you have that picture, then you can start to figure out, okay, how do I tailor my message so it really resonates with these people? Doesn't matter if it's a blog post, a social media update, even just a regular conversation. Be thoughtful about what you're saying. Make sure it's addressing the real needs of the person you're talking to.
And it's not a one and done thing. It's an ongoing process, you know, listening, learning, and adjusting as you go.
Yeah.
This digital world is constantly shifting, so we got to stay flexible. Always tweak those communication strategies.
And, you know, one of the big things I took away from Director's Corner's whole approach is that data is your friend. Don't be scared to track your results, see what's actually working, and then, you know, adjust if you need to.
100%. Data can tell you so much about what your audience is responding to. And it can help you get your message even sharper over time. Website analytics, social media insights, heck, even just paying attention to what people are saying to you, the feedback you're getting. Don't be afraid to try things, see what happens, and then tweak it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, you know, into this whole world of targeted content, let's leave our listener with one last thought. We've seen how this works in the funeral industry, but honestly, the possibilities are kind of endless. Whether you're building a business, sharing your creative work, or just trying to connect with people online, these principles matter. Specificity, authenticity, using data to guide your decisions, that's how you stand out from the crowd.
It's about cutting through all the noise, right?
Right.
And building those genuine connections, the ones that actually matter. So go out there, be specific, be yourself, and let your voice be heard.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope you found it insightful and, you know, maybe even a little inspiring. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting.